Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the mildly interesting episode hosted by my brain. Oppenheimer is coming at the end of this July and I honestly cannot wait for it, so I figured, you know what, for the next videos, let's talk about all of the Chris Nolan films I have seen. And the second film on this list is Inception. Now, Inception is a pretty famous film at this point. I'm pretty sure like most of you have already seen it. It made $800 million at the box office. It has an 8.8 star rating on IMDb. That's the same rating as Black Mirror and Fight Club, I believe, yeah. Now, I have heard a lot of great stuff about this film, although I did kind of get spoiled, like, the ending, about, like, what it was all gonna be. But still, I really loved it. The entire movie was just like a joyride from start to finish. I was constantly wondering, like, okay, what's gonna happen after this? Because I don't know what happened in this sequence, but I do know that this is gonna happen at some point, so I can't wait for that sequence to happen. And when those sequences happen, oh my goodness, those are incredible. I figured, you know what, I'll talk about this film. First part is the visual side. It never gets stale. The movie never gets stale with its visuals. We go from Japan to Tokyo to... Tokyo to Paris, from choppers to trains, from rain to snow to hotels to storms. It always remains interesting no matter what is going. And that contributes a lot to the experience. You're constantly going like, oh my goodness, this is like absolutely incredible. Especially when you realize that some of these scenes were done for real. There were also scenes from the movie that just like live rent-free, at least in my head personally. There's the beginning heist sequence, there's the folding city sequence, there's the train crash sequence in the middle of Los Angeles, there's the rotating hallway. We cannot forget to talk about the rotating hallway. That is truly something else. It's one of the best action scenes I have ever seen in pretty much any movie, and I think that's saying something. I've seen Baby Driver. I know how good action scenes can get. The way that Christopher Nolan designs these dreamscapes, they always live rent-free in your head and you never get bored with them. You're constantly wondering what's the next location gonna be like. That's what keeps you throughout the entire film, as well as some other stuff that we'll get to later. Part 2, the soundtrack. It fits very, very nicely with what's going on in the scene. It's like fast-paced and it's also menacing at the same time. The horns are really something else. They're really unique. But one track that I do have something to say about is Time. That's played at the very end of the movie. It's really just 4 chords. It's just a C and then an E minor and then a G and then a D major chord. And yet, that is so memorable. The way that it slowly builds up with these unique sounds, it lives rent-free, at least in my head. It's kind of like Sweden from C418. In case you don't know, that's from Minecraft. Like Time, Sweden's really just 4 chords, and yet these 2 songs are absolutely incredible. And the way that they build up and then go down, that's really something else. Overall, the soundtrack just pretty much lives rent-free in your head. Part 3, the characters. So at the beginning of the movie, it's revealed that Cobb had a wife who supposedly died. And because we're going into the depths of the human mind for this heist movie, we start to see fragments of his guilt and his memories crashing into that and starting to sabotage everything. It's really a character development story, and it's told in such an interesting way. And on top of that, the way that the character development is slowly built up and reaches its conclusion at the end, it is so amazing. As he starts to go down into the depths of his mind more, his darkest memories and secrets with his dead wife start to resurface back up, and is starting to affect the mission at hand. In other words, the character side is directly affecting the plot. And keep in mind, before the final encounter with the memory of his dead wife, which is actually possible because of the way that this movie is built, before that, we're constantly just wondering what's going to happen next. So the stakes keep getting higher. We want to be able to make sure that Cobb can get over his dead wife in a way so that this mission can succeed and he can go back to his kids. I don't think that's really spoilers considering that most of it is explained in the beginning of the movie. But honestly, it's a really, really great redemption arc for him. Leonardo DiCaprio acted the hell out of that role. All of the other characters were fun as well. I really love Tom Brady's scene where he pulls out a rocket launcher. That was truly something else. That's when I was like, okay, I like this guy.
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
Part 4, the plot. The way that the story plays out, it's like a heist movie, except we're leaving something behind instead of taking something. Essentially, the movie begins with Cobb and Arthur doing a dream heist. They're trying to steal a secret from this businessman's mind. But it turns out the businessman thinks that they're really talented, so he hires them for one job that allows Cobb to finally go back to his children and reunite with all of them. And that is to perform Inception. That was a title job, yes. Essentially, Inception is leaving something behind, planting a memory deep inside the mind of a person to make it seem like it was their idea, and so they would act out on it because they think it was their idea. That is already a really interesting concept, and the way that it plays out adds so much to it. Because it's dreams, we're really only limited by our imagination, right? And oh boy, does Christopher Nolan not really spare any expense here. Every single sequence that we see, it's just so like jarring. It like stays in your mind forever because of how out of place it is, but at the same time how much it fits the movie as well. A freight train crashing through the middle of Los Angeles wouldn't make much sense in a normal heist movie, but a heist movie taking place inside the human mind, where we're really only limited by our imagination, that's completely plausible, and so it would make sense to write that in to make it more memorable. That's what Christopher Nolan does, and I feel like this movie overall pretty much incepts its way into your brain. It lives rent-free in your head. The soundtrack and the visuals and even the story, they live deep inside your head, so you're always reminded of it. It gets to the point that anytime I see something like visually interesting, like say like something like folding, like space or time folding in some way, my mind immediately goes, oh, Christopher Nolan, of course! So yeah, this movie is pretty much able to incept your way into its mind because of how unique everything is. The visual side always remains interesting, especially the dreamscapes. They are amazing. The soundtrack with the horns lives rent-free in your head. If one of the soundtracks dream is collapsing, it actually got its way into my alarm clock, and I still wake up to it like almost every single day. The character side is really satisfying to see. It's really amazing to see like Leonardo DiCaprio's journey going from this troubled dream thief mourning over the loss of his dead wife to being forced to grow up at the end because his character flaw of like not being able to let go of his dead wife is directly affecting the plot, which constantly remains interesting. There's always twists and turns here and there, combined with everything else that we talked before. Every single part that I talked about combines into one whole package. A movie that incepts itself into your mind. Honestly, that sounds like a pretty whole video at this point. Oh no, it was all a dream! Ah! Oh my gosh. It sounded like a good video idea. I better get started to work on it quick. No!